This is Money, Power, Politics, and today we're talking Social Security, something we need to discuss, yet politicians never want to. For the first time in the Social Security program's history, costs exceeded income in 2018. This is a big deal, and as more people retire, the program seems to be at an even greater risk. In fact, the trustees of the Social Security and Medicare forecast the program's reserves will be depleted by 2034, at which point the program would no longer be able to pay full benefits. Well, maybe there's a solution coming. This weekend, a challenge. The Road to 2092 is bringing 250 college students together from 28 universities across the country to present a plan to save Social Security. So think about it like this. It's like Shark Tank meets public policy. The winning team gets to go to Washington to pitch Congress and the current administration on their plan. And the judges of the competition join me now. Former Senator Heidi Heitkamp and former National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn. Listen, we're going to cover news of the day, the Fed, the border, 2020. But first, we've spoken to lots of Democratic candidates. None of them have had a solution yet to Social Security. You're actually trying to find one with college students. Help me understand first how urgent this is. I actually did an entitlement reform college tour with Stan Druckenmiller and Ken Langone a few years ago. We couldn't get college students to care. Is that changing? Did they realize it?
I think it is changing, Stephanie. So, the senator and I have spent the semester at Harvard teaching a class about the real state of the union. And in that, we've gone week by week talking about the current economic issues facing our country. And we've had standing room only in our sessions with kids wanting to understand the economic problems. We obviously tackled Social Security here because if you look at the expenditures of the United States government, we have $2 trillion plus expenditures, one being Medicare and the other being Social Security. Kids are interested in tackling these problems. And then when you tell children today, our kids in our class are somewhere between 18 and 28, that they're going to pay in, but they're probably not going to collect because you said it in your opening. This system will run out of money in 2034. And there's a bunch of ways to fix it. And it's like any other simple mathematical equation. The earlier you get to this equation, the easier it is to simplify. We're really excited about this weekend and how many kids we've got coming together to really look at this problem that is going to face us in the very near future. 2034 is right around the corner.
Isn't the issue, though, short-termism? We know this is a long-term problem, but current retirees or those who are close to retiring aren't going to face the problem. The money will be there. It's the younger generation that's, first of all, they must not want to even pay into the system once they look at these numbers.
Stephanie, that's the whole theory of our presentation, the real state of the union. We talk every moment about the generational transfer of debt and why they have to make these issues a voting issue if they intend to have a solid economic foundation when they're our age. And so we've really hammered that away. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we're at Harvard. And so I think when you get 280 students who are interested in this competition, interested in having that conversation, that speaks to a lot of concern about long-term interests in the economy of this country and in these programs.
I'm going to note Gary is significantly older than you.
That's actually not true.
That's actually not true. But by coincidence, my Social Security year is 2034.
It is.
It is, by coincidence.
Yeah. Okay. Everybody's really crying out there for you, Gary.
But the interesting thing is, if you look at what will happen in 2034, we will have three choices, right? Choice number one is the government will just continue benefits at the current level and they'll deficit spend it, which is probably the path of least resistance. Choice number two will go from the current 12.4% tax that we're charging every working individual. And by the way, this is very regressive. We charge it from the first dollar you earn to the $139,900. We'll take that 12.4 tax to 15.18% tax, or we can either cut everyone's benefits by 17%, or we can cut the future recipients, meaning if you start receiving Social Security the day after we trip, they'll cut your benefits by 21%. That's the mathematical equation we're dealing with. There's real numbers here and there's real math involved with this, and that's why if we deal with this now in 2019, we can avoid some of these problems.
Okay, well, how are you going to do that when you've got these students are going to come up with a solution? They're then going to present it to Washington. we don't hear Washington talk about a solution. Many of the 2020 hopefuls are talking Medicare for all.
Yeah.
These things only cost more money.
One of the elements of the judging is going to be political possibilities, and so it's not just doing the math, because we can do the math. There's lots of ideas out there and solutions on how you fix it, including Larson's bill. But we want them to think about who do they have to persuade, and how do they create a package that could, in fact, have political viability in Washington, D.C. And that's the piece I'm really most interested in, is to find out how sophisticated these kids are about how difficult politically this task is.
Okay, but math and humanity are two different things. I mean, Medicare expansion is about trying to help people stay healthy. So how do you marry the two? I mean, the challenge you're giving these kids, do you know how to solve?
I think I have an answer.
Which is?
I'm not going to taint the competition. See, I think I have a winning answer. But look, Stephanie, this is the point exactly. So every candidate that you've had in here and that MSNBC has on, they're talking about social programs. And they're very good at talking about social programs. They're not very good at talking about how they're going to pay for them. What our competition is about is, how do you pay for Social Security? You have to come up with a solution. You can't just say, oh, I want to fix it and I want to give everyone something. You have to say, look, this is how we're going to fix it. And as the senator said, this is politically how we're going to make it acceptable. So the proposal is a 5-page proposal, and it's 3 pages of math and 2 pages of how you're going to politically be able to sell this to both the Republicans and the Democrats.
And I'm guessing that portion of it will be about bipartisanship.
Yeah, it will be.
Because Social Security impacts everyone. I'm thinking right now about immigration, and we're not seeing anyone reach across the aisle. That is something you did when you were in office. Yeah. When you look at the news of the day, when you look at the president calling something a national emergency that wasn't, but as the days pass and the situation becomes more complicated, it's starting to look as though it's an emergency. If you were to give advice to those in Congress right now as we face the immigration situation, what do you think they should do?
I'd say take the 2013 bill, put it on the floor in the House, and then send it over to the Senate. We had broad bipartisan support for the 2013 bill. It's the same issue with Social Security. We know what the solutions are. We've seen compromises come together. We've got to build political will. And the one thing we're trying to do at the Institute of Politics at Harvard, with all these brilliant young kids that we've been working with, is build an attitude about bipartisanship in solving big problems. You know, we aren't going to get from A to B to bipartisanship in 5 minutes here. Hopefully, by talking to young people who we think will be leaders of the future, that we will in fact be expanding their opportunities to work across the aisle and come up with creative and nonpartisan solutions to these problems.
Most people across the country do not care about politics. It's not a priority for them. Taking care of their families is. But we see the administration, Gary, you were a former member of this administration. We have seen more and more people leave the White House, and it seems to be because they're unwilling to follow exactly the president's orders. Now there's changes potentially coming in the Fed. Stephen Moore and Herman Cain. Stephen Moore is a guy who's written things about taxes and tariffs like Larry Kudlow has that are not in line with the current administration. But now they want to join the board. What's your take, especially with these two gentlemen?
Well, I think one of them doesn't have the votes. It's clear that 4 Republicans have said publicly they're not going to support. So I think that name is going to get withdrawn even probably before it gets officially sent up. And the other one will probably go through a process of being heard on the Senate floor. And the question is, does he have the qualifications? And it will come out in the process. There are some issues around him that I think will be interesting to listen to when he goes through the hearing process. That's why we have an advise and consent process in the United States.
And I think the biggest question you're going to see from the Banking Committee in that confirmation is, are you really independent of the president? Are you really willing to not listen to a dog whistle and do what the president asked you to do?
What do you think of Elizabeth Warren's tax plan?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting, because what she's done in a couple simple sound bites here is, we had sort of universal consensus among almost everyone on the corporate side, as well as Republicans and Democrats, agreed that we should not have a worldwide taxation system. Elizabeth Warren has brought back a worldwide taxation system. She basically says whatever you publish as your earnings, we're now going to put another 7% tax on it. But more importantly, Stephanie, this is really interesting, we have certain preferential items in this country that you run through the revenue line that you don't run through the tax line, to be very transparent, and the SEC says that. A really interesting one, which is really obvious to everyone, would be muni interest. Muni interest goes through your revenue line, does not go, you do not pay taxes on. Do we not want people to own muni bonds anymore?
Long story short, Gary Cohn does not like Elizabeth Warren's corporate tax plan. Heidi, Gary, good luck this weekend. It's going to be amazing. I want those winners to come here on this show.
You're going to have them. We're excited to bring them here.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.